Good morning. How are you doing today? Today is a special day because from today onwards, we are starting a daily news show on TFIR. As you know, the focus of this channel is on emerging technologies, emerging market, emerging trends, and of course, open source, which is at the heart and soul of all these emerging technologies that are going on. But we will talk about very wide spectrum of technology news here, which, as I said, the focus will be on the emerging trends and technologies so that I keep you updated with how new and latest technologies are going to affect your life directly sooner or later. At the same time, what role is open source playing there? As usual, I also run a series of interviews where I travel around the globe and meet a lot of people and talk to them and bring all those interviews to you, all the way from Linus Torvalds to Richard Stallman to Adreno founder and whatnot. So all those things will be there, and from now onwards we will have a weekly show where we will focus on one topic on every show, but daily news will be there on every day. So you will be getting two shows per day. One would be daily news, second would be the regular shows, which is women in tech, diversity, deep dive, where I'll talk to a founder or technologist to deep dive into a particular technology. One day I would like to dedicate to Linux and Linux desktop so that we can talk about how you can better use Linux desktop for your own workflow. And we will of course talk about other technologies like Windows or Mac OS, because you know I love technology. I'm not kind of locking myself into a particular bubble of Linux or Mac OS or Windows. So it's so that you know there's something for everybody, and the core audience that I'm trying to build here is all the way from CIO level people who do want to see where the trends are going, where they should be investing into all these new technologies. At the same time, we'll talk about enthusiasts, that why you should pick Linux and open source so that they can become future developers. Of course, we'll have a very strong focus on developers, so you'll get something for everybody. And of course, once in a while, we'll also talk about the gadgets and toys that we use. I'm a nerd. I love technology in general, so I buy a lot of gadgets and toys. I play with them, so that will also be one of the focus of this show, but we will segregate them in different shows so that you know which one to watch. Anyway, so back to the point of daily news. Today we are not going to give a wrap-up of news. Usually what we'll do is every day I'll give you a wrap-up of what happened today in, let's say, 10 minutes or something like that. I don't want to make it a 1 hour long show. But today we are going to talk about something which is really critical, and since I have been covering this company for a very long time, at the same time I have been interacting with the community and I've seen some misinformation there, so I just wanted to talk about it, and that is SUSE. As you all know, SUSE has been resold, reacquired, and this time the buyer is EQT from Sweden. They bought SUSE from Micro Focus, and if I'm not wrong, this is the fourth acquisition of SUSE, all the way from early days, from Novell to Attachmate to Micro Focus and to EQT. I feel that SUSE went through the roughest patch during Novell days, because Novell had their own proprietary products and they were somehow either competing with SUSE's open source project. At the same time, they're trying to integrate them, so there was a lot of conflict. At the same time, back in those days, Novell had an agreement with Microsoft, and that was the hot period where a lot of things were going on in terms of patents aggression from Microsoft. So SUSE got beaten up a bit back in those days, though by now Microsoft has changed totally. They are kind of I consider them as a brand new company with a totally new approach. They are very friendly to Linux and open source. I talk to them often, so I do know what is going on in there. But once SUSE was acquired by Attachmate, then things changed, because SUSE kind of became an kind of independent business within Attachmate, because Attachmate split SUSE and Novell, and that's when Niels Brockman and his team they took the kind of leadership of SUSE and start driving the company in the right direction. And then when SUSE kind of stabilized, and then Attachmate kind of merged or was acquired by Micro Focus, that's when SUSE got financial stability from Micro Focus, because though even if Micro Focus was not a very well-known company, they were into a legacy business, so they did have a lot of financial support that SUSE needed at that time. And after that, you must have seen that SUSE has been hiring people a lot. They have grown beyond their typical Linux market, and they are into cloud and containers and all those latest emerging technology stuff that they are doing now. I've been talking to Niels Brockman every SUSECon. I meet him and talk to him, and I talk to a lot of other top tier SUSE folks, all the way from CTO, which is Thomas, to Michael Miller, and so I have a very good idea where SUSE is heading. At the same time, I have a lot of friends within the openSUSE community, because I also use openSUSE Tumbleweed, so I do get a lot of insights from the company, that what's going on in there, both on the community side as well as the company side. So I'm quite confident that things are moving in the right direction. So when I heard this story that they are going to get acquired, I was like, okay, let's talk about it. So I talked, I set up a phone call with Michael Miller, who is the VP of Strategy and Alliance at SUSE. And we had a 30-minute long discussion over phone, where we discussed different topics. So there are certain questions people have in their mind. So I tried to get answer to this question. I have posted a story which you can read. But here's the gist. The number one is that you may be wondering, who is EQT? So as Miller explains, that he calls them a growth investor, unlike other private investors, where they buy a company and then they try to squeeze as much profit from those hot companies as quickly as they can. And then there are companies who acquire promising companies, and they operate those companies for a long term so that they can get profit for them. So these equity or private equity firms, they don't invest in the company per se. They look at the company. Their business model is basically that there is a promising company, acquire them, operate them, and make money from them. And then you can let them die, or you can sell them off again. So you invest, like, let's say $2 billion into a company, and after 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, you will sell that company for, let's say, 10 billion. Or in the meantime, so this is how it works. It's more like investing, like venture capitalists, but it's different kind of. But the way equity is different, according to Michael Miller, is that they are growth investors. They are not the typical private equity investors. So what they do is that they invest heavily into the areas where SUSE needs support at the moment, so they can grow rapidly and fast and become successful. So they can, by they I mean equity, can get returns on their investment faster. But this investment is coming not through the cost cutting or operating the company that they want, but instead it comes through investing heavily into the company and get heavy returns back. And SUSE is already a promising company. Last year they made something around $305 million. Of course, that is not huge compared to Red Hat, which is something about $4 billion. But I mean, if you look at SUSE's history, it has been going through a rough patch, but the company is resilient enough to just continue to survive and thrive. And the problem with the SUSE was that it was mostly trying, in my opinion, those SUSE people may disagree, it was just trying to stay afloat, try to survive. Now it has money to not only survive, but spread its wings and actually take off and fly. And that's what they have been doing. If you look at SUSE's stories for the last 2 years, ever since Micro Focus acquired them, I mean, they are into cloud now. They have their own OpenStack. They have Cloud Foundry distribution, and they have container platform. So they are, spreading into the areas where they need to spread. So that is what equity will get in from SUSE. They will invest in SUSE and they'll get a lot of money back. Now Miller says that equity typically gives 3 to 5 years to a company to show some returns. So you can safely assume that equity will be investing in SUSE for at least 3 to 5 years before they start squeezing profits out of them. But as I said, SUSE is already a profit-making company, from what I know, and so it should be, and it's more about the more you add sugar, the sweeter it becomes. So the more money equity invest into SUSE, the better it will be. Now, What about Micro Focus? If SUSE was a profit-making company, why would they sell it? Now, Miller says that Micro Focus is also kind of growth equity, investor. They acquired SUSE and they sold at a profit. But Micro Focus itself was going through a rough time. The reason was that I feel they made a big bet, big mistake by acquiring HPE assets last year or last year for $8.8 billion. That was massive. HPE was already kind of struggling. So they bought HPE and that was a big hit. And then their CEO left the company and the company's shares also start tanking. So even if SUSE was relatively profit-making company, it was making gradual profits, this offer is something that was great help for Micro Focus. Suddenly you are looking at $2.5 billion cash. That's a lot of money to recover all those losses that you're making. So it was a deal they could not say no to, so they sold it. So that's what it meant for Micro Focus. Now, what does it mean for SUSE? As I explained earlier, that equity will be investing in SUSE, and this is what SUSE needs. I was reading a story at Oh My God Ubuntu, and I was kind of it's funny because the author wrote that SUSE is not a company that is innovating and they should innovate. Innovation is the most abused word in the tech world. Everybody is innovating something, but what are we innovating? And here is the thing, well, people don't understand. Innovation is good, it's important, but most important is that what are you going to do with that innovation? I innovate, let's say, a mechanism where you can fly cars. But if there aren't enough business models, they can build a business around these flying cars. What good is that innovation or technology? So more important or equally important is, what are you going to do with that technology? If you look at the whole desktop Linux world, you'll see a lot of innovations, so-called innovations happening, but you cannot put it to use, you cannot bring it to users, so it fails. So what SUSE is doing is that it solves real problem for real people, and not those problems doesn't have to be innovative. Sometimes you just have to help a company run their infrastructure safely in a stable manner so they can run their business. That is why SUSE is being used across Europe, across South America, and a lot of Asian countries by companies which has been around for decades, because it offers that stability. So that's what SUSE has been doing for a very long time. And SUSE, don't forget, is the oldest Linux vendor. Linux was announced in 1991 by Linus Torvalds, and 1992 SUSE came into existence. 1993 Red Hat came into existence. And SUSE has also been one of the leading contributors to a lot of open source technologies. So saying that they are not innovating simply means that you're not keeping an eye on what technologies are being developed. If you're just looking at the desktop icons, then yeah, maybe SUSE is not investing. But if you look at a lot of other work that is going on there, SUSE is doing a lot of things. Linus Torvalds has not innovated anything other than Linux kernel and Gate, but the way he manages and maintains Linux kernel, that is even more critical than a lot of innovation put together. So please don't abuse the term innovation. SUSE has been contributing a lot, and they are contributing whatever you can expect from a company like that. So that's great. Go and see any open source projects, not the desktop projects, not the RSS feeds for the Linux desktop, but actual open source project, and you'll see SUSE there. So what it means for SUSE is that as they evolve further, graduate from being a Linux vendor, and they go and target all these emerging technologies. And as Michael Miller told me that, they are looking at machine learning, they are looking at IoT, of course, containers and cloud is already there. So they need to have technologies, in-house expertise, actual technology that they can productize. Sometimes companies, adopt the organic route, where technologies are developed in-house over a period of time. At the same time, the market is changing so rapidly that you cannot afford to have that much time to develop those technologies. So what you do is you look around and you acquire companies that have developed those technologies, and that's why you see a lot of acquisition happens. Even companies like Microsoft or Apple or Google, they cannot develop everything internally, so they do have to go out and acquire companies. So when I talked to Miller, so he said, that equity will be, investing in two areas. First of all, to support and run their existing business, which means hire more people so that they can expand their team, because the business is growing, so you need more people to handle that business. At the same time, invest into buying new technologies and new companies. So that's how SUSE will get help from equity to grow at a very faster pace than it was growing earlier under Micro Focus. So I think that is good news for SUSE. At the same time, since under equity, SUSE will not be another business unit of another software company, which has been happening since Novell, Attachment, and Micro Focus days. Now SUSE is an independent company inside an equity firm. So being an independent company also means that they don't have the same infrastructure that they were getting at Micro Focus or Novell or at Attachment. Now they will have to hire a lot of more top tier people, like they need a CFO, they need a CIO, and a lot of other people, who can handle those areas. So Miller told me that they will actually be expanding not only the top tier, but also a lot of other areas where they need to grow faster. So you will be seeing SUSE actually growing in the coming years. So from SUSE's perspective, I think it's a good news, because that's the kind of help they needed. Now, what does it mean for openSUSE? So I was talking to Richard Brown, who's a good friend of mine, and he's also the chairman of openSUSE board. I think my focus is shifting because it's GH5S, and I set it on autofocus, and GH5S is not known for autofocusing. Anyway, so I got him in the morning and I started chatting, and he was in the UK on a vacation, and he said, he got a call from Brockman, who is the CEO of SUSE, to reassure him that, first of all, that you heard the news from me, and second is that, nothing is going to change. So I asked his opinion, and he was like, that's true, openSUSE or open source is the heart of SUSE. In today's world, you cannot survive or sustain or grow without open source. So open source is very, very critical to SUSE. And that's there, when you look at SUSE or Red Hat, these two companies, open source is the heart and soul of these companies. So that is not going to change. So nobody in the openSUSE or open source community should worry about anything changing. In fact, it may get better and better, because being an independent business unit, Brockman won't have to, justify to a board, why, we are doing this. So because that's how we do it, right? Open source is the way how do we think. So there's no argument as such. So I think in overall, I feel that things are going to get better for SUSE after this acquisition, because first of all, they are going to be an independent company, which will be making decisions for themselves. All the profit that they make will be invested back into the company for the future growth. At the same time, equity will be injecting them with all the steroids that they need to further grow. So there is no worries in terms of SUSE that they're getting acquired again. No, but it's all good. Eventually, I would love to see SUSE become an independent company like SUSE INC, like Red Hat or Microsoft or Google or Apple. So when I asked Miller, of course, SUSE has always been owned by another company, so they don't have any say. Micro Focus could have spinned SUSE as an independent business, so that it could just run independently. But the thing was, they needed, as I said, they were going through a rough patch, so it made more sense for them to sell it and get that $1 billion than to spin it as an independent company. But as equity gives SUSE at least 3 to 5 years, this may be the time where SUSE doesn't have to kind of be accountable to another software vendor. They may pursue the road of becoming an independent company, though I cannot comment or say precisely, or even Miller did not say specifically, but he said that is one of the options they will be looking as they move forward. And I think looking at the political situation that is going on in this world, number one, the way the Trump administration is waging an unnecessary trade war, and which is going to hurt Americans a lot. At the same time, next year Brexit is happening, so I think this is good news for SUSE, because Micro Focus is a UK based company. After Brexit, things are going to be very, very challenging, because SUSE is a German company, and there will be a lot of things that will create a lot of conflict in the UK. So UK and US are going to the same phase right now. They created unnecessary chaos for no reason. By getting bought by a Swedish company, SUSE has kind of avoided all those challenges that would have come with Brexit next year. At the same time, being a Europe-based company, SUSE is kind of because as the trade war is looming, and a lot of concerns are being around US-based companies, SUSE might be in a position to take advantage of this and may spread its presence within the bloc, or within those countries which are kind of facing a trade war with the US. So it may see growth in adoption within Europe, within South America, or within Asian countries. So that would also mean good news for SUSE. Anyway, in overall, I think this is really good news, and we should be happy about it, that SUSE is actually gradually moving towards becoming an independent company. So that's my overall analysis of what's going on with SUSE. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you can keep in updates every day. At the same time, you all know that as I'm building TFIR, I'm looking for sponsorships. So we have a lot of things to offer to companies. So if you want to become a sponsor, if you want us to talk about your technologies, your business models, please become a sponsor of TFIR. You can just mail it to me, and I'll send you all the details. And as far as our readers are concerned, if you value our content, please become a supporter through Patreon. The links to the Patreon is below. So as you all know, there's no free lunch. Somebody has to pay the bills. So please support the good work that you enjoy. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye for now.